Good morning, men. So, I'm up in my office working above my garage. We have a couple that comes one day a week for 2 hours and does a little housework. And so Isaac crept up the stairs, knocked on my door, stuck his head in, and with great sobriety said, "There are 4 people from the United States Department of Agriculture at your front door, and they would like to speak to you." Well, I immediately go into fight or flight mode. I immediately felt like, gosh, there must be something I need to confess to that I've done wrong. So anyway, I went downstairs, and sure enough, I opened the door, and there are these 4 United States Department of Agriculture workers. And I said, what did I do? How can I help you? Well, turns out that there are 56,000 traps that are set around the state of Florida in order to catch things like oriental fruit flies. And apparently just down the street from my house is one of these traps, and they had trapped 2 male oriental fruit flies. And it sounds like no big deal, but I actually went out and Googled this and found out it's actually a very big deal, because if they don't catch these things, they can destroy an entire agricultural crop, really eventually for a whole state. So anyway, I felt like I'd been descended upon, though, with these 4 workers. It was kind of like a SWAT team for fruit flies, And they really ended up, I think, giving this more attention than an anthrax threat. It was really interesting. So they had a questionnaire, and they asked me these questions. And so I did my very best to say yes or no. But I was thinking as I was doing this, wow, if I had brought a piece of fruit in from a foreign country and I chose to lie, and that had been the piece of fruit. The whole system that under which we live, it's really all fundamentally built on trust. It's built on integrity. It's built on the concept that people actually do keep their word. In fact, when you think about just driving around in traffic, by far and away, 99.9% of the people are doing the right thing. They're keeping their word, the word they gave when they were given the opportunity to get the license. And, of course, it's the other people who are running the red lights that create all the problems, people weaving in and out of traffic. By and large, most people are keeping their word, and the system works because of trust. And so I gave the honest answers when I filled out the thing, of course, or actually he filled it out. I just answered the questions. We're going to talk a little bit about this morning. The title of the message is The Struggle to Keep Our Word. We're in the Sermon on the Mount, in the passage that Jesus refers to as keeping our oaths. We'll talk about the teaching itself, 3 points we'll make, and then how you can increase the value of your yes when you do say yes. So first, let's take a look at the teaching. This is really, I think today, it's probably time in this series to talk about the difficulty that we have in keeping the law. And so the message today is for disciples. Maybe some of us feel like we are under the burden of trying to keep the law, particularly in this area, struggling to keep our word. Okay, we're at Matthew chapter 5, verse 33. Jesus says this, "Again, you have heard it said to the people long ago, 'Do not break your oath, but keep the oaths you have made to the Lord.'" Now, this is a reference to Numbers chapter 30, verse 2. Where Moses is giving a teaching to the Israelites. Well, what is an oath? Again, it says, Do not break your oath, but keep your oaths, the ones that you've made to the Lord. Well, what is an oath? Well, an oath is a promise. It's a commitment. It could be a vow. It's a pledge. Basically, an oath is giving our word. It's giving our word. What are some examples of oaths that might be taken? Well, there's the presidential inauguration coming up next year, at which someone will take an oath of office. When you are sworn in at a jury, I just got my jury notice third time. The other two times I was out of town, and I guess three's a charm. So I'm going to be going to jury duty, and they're going to swear us in, and I'm going to take an oath. And maybe if I was a witness, they would swear me in. They would put my hand. I don't know. I think you put your hand on. Do you put your hands on Bibles anymore? How do you know? Oh, he's a cop. I guess that's why he knows. Okay, what are some of the other kinds of oaths that are out there that you could think of? Anybody? Okay, marriage. Till death do us part. You take an oath or a vow in marriage. What else? Okay, military. You take an oath to defend. What else? Boy Scouts. You take an oath to be a Boy Scout. Okay, medical doctor, the Hippocratic Oath. What else? How about when you join the church? You take vows when you join the church. When you go through a confirmation, you have a confirmation ceremony, you take vows. When you have your children baptized as you as parents, you would take a vow or an oath. What else? Move it out into commerce, contracts. You know, when you sign a contract, when you sign a job description, when you sign a mortgage, you're making an oath. You're taking a vow. How many of you are promise keepers? I am. My constituent number is 3724. 327724. And so I made the 7 promises of a promise keeper. That's a vow. That's an oath. But there are more day-to-day kinds of oaths and vows we take too. Like when you tell your wife, yes, I'll take out the garbage. And then you don't. Or you promise your wife that, yes, if I'm going to be late for dinner, I'll call. But you don't. That's a vow that you've made. Or with your kids. Maybe you've said to your children that if you do your chores tonight, if you do your homework tonight, then tomorrow, Saturday, I'll take you to the park. But then you get tied up in something else and you don't end up at the park. What else? Maybe it's a deadline that you made a promise to your boss that you'd get this work done by Thursday. Thursday comes and goes, and you've done this so many times, you just doesn't, even when you say it, yeah, I'll have that done by Thursday. You've done that so many times and not done it by Thursday that your boss knows that you don't really mean it, and don't really mean it either. It just kind of, rolls off the tongue. Or a pledge that gets made to a church. I know that you might find this shocking, but about 30% of the people who make pledges, Christian pledges of money, don't fulfill those. And so anyway, it's hard. It is a struggle to keep our word. And so Jesus is saying here, you've heard it said to the people long ago, don't break your oath, but keep the oaths that you have made to the Lord. So you can see why that was maybe part of the law. Then in verse 34, what is the problem that Jesus wants to solve here? Let's look. Verse 34. But I tell you, do not swear at all, either by heaven, for it is God's throne, or by the earth, for it is His footstool, or by Jerusalem, for it is the city of the great King. And do not swear by your head, for you cannot make even one hair white or black. Simply let your yes be yes, and your no be no. Anything else other than that comes from the evil one. So what is the problem that he's trying to solve here? Well, because it appears like he's lowering his standard. Instead of making your oath in the name of the Lord, you just make your yes. It looks like, it appears at first blush like he's lowering the standard here. But in the Old Testament, oaths are very important. Oaths are very common. Abraham had his servant take an oath that he would go and find a wife for his son. David and Jonathan, they made a covenant. They made an oath. David made an oath to Jonathan. The Israelite spies made an oath with Rahab, the prostitute, that they would not destroy the family. There's the famous Gibeonite ruse where the Gibeonites pretended to be from a land far away and came and tried to make a treaty with the Israelites, and they didn't consult the Lord, and the Israelites made an oath with the Gibeonites, and then later they found out that they were living right by them. But since they had made that oath, they didn't go ahead and do war against them. Paul took an oath. He made a vow. So making and keeping vows is certainly very biblical, very Old Testament. So what is the problem then that Jesus is trying to solve? Well, keep your finger where you are there and turn over to Matthew chapter 23, verse 16. This is the passage that pronounces the woes to the scribes and the Pharisees, the woe are you for this and woe are you for that. Verse 16 says, Woe to you, blind guides! You say, if anyone swears by the temple, it means nothing. But if anyone swears by the gold of the temple, he is bound by that oath. You blind fools, which is greater, the gold or the temple that makes the gold sacred? You also say, if anyone swears by the altar, it means nothing. But if anyone swears by the gift on it, he is bound by his oath. You blind men, which is greater, the gift or the altar that makes the gift sacred? Therefore, he who swears by the altar swears by it and everything on it. And he who swears by the temple swears by it and by the one who dwells in it. And he who swears by heaven swears by God's throne and by the one who sits on it. Well, what was actually taking place, it appears, I hadn't read this anywhere else, so I don't know if this is really true or not. But it seems to me that what was going on is that the Pharisees would make an oath to God that they would keep, and then other oaths that were not so made didn't have to keep them. So there were two standards going on. If I told you, yes, I'll do that, and I say that I will do that in the name of the Lord, then I'm obligated to do that. But if I just say to you, sure, Tom, I'll have that to you by Thursday, no problem. It's okay not to keep that oath because I haven't made that oath in the name of the Lord. Following me here? So, what Jesus is saying here is he's saying, hey, don't swear. Don't even swear by the Lord, by anything spiritual. Just simply let your yes be yes and your no be no in everything. In other words, instead of Jesus saying you need to keep your oath when you make it to the Lord, but like the Pharisees, it's okay to break your oaths in other places. He said, my standard is not really lower, it's actually higher, because instead of having to only keep your word in some things, like the Pharisees are saying, I'm saying you have to keep your word in everything. Let your yes be yes and your no be no in everything. Simply. And anything else other than that, it's from the evil one. Is this making sense? So what is Jesus saying? He's saying that there are not two standards for our word. There's one standard for our word. This is another example of confusing the letter of the law and the spirit of the law. The letter of the law would be, if I make an oath to the Lord, then I need to keep that. But if I don't, well, then I don't violate the letter of the law. Jesus, once again, is saying it's not the letter of the law that's important, it's the spirit of the law. And the spirit of the law actually raises the standard. So the big idea for the day is this. And by the way, just keep in mind, Jesus is not changing. He's not changing the law. What He is doing, He is simply restoring the original intent of the law that has been corrupted. He's not changing anything. This has always been the spirit of the law, is that we would always keep our word. So He's not changing God's law. He's merely clarifying and restoring the original intent of the word. And He says, let your yes be yes and your no be no. Anything else beyond that is from evil. So the big idea is that we want to let our yes be yes or no be no. And so here it is. I will simply say what I mean and mean what I say. To say what I mean, let your yes, if it's a yes, let it be yes. If it's a no, let it be no. So, hey, can you get that to me on Thursday? Okay, let's see. He's my boss. I'm already kind of on the outs with him anyway. He's kind of a control freak, a little pushy. He's got me lined up on 3 other projects. You know, there's really no way I can get this done. Hey, boss, I've got these 3 other projects that I've promised you. And I can get that to you by Thursday. But in order to do that, I'll have to put up one of these other projects on hold. Which one would you like me to put on hold? Or would you rather have me do these 3 and then I can get that to you by Monday and still do these 3 on time? You see, instead of just saying, okay, we'll get it done. Hey, I had, before the rainy season, several years ago when the hurricanes came through, I lost a few shingles on one corner of the roof. Well, I knew that it wouldn't be fair to try to get a contractor to come and work on my thing when there were people who had real problems. So I just put that off. And then I put that off some more. And so I scrambled up there earlier in the year, and I noticed that there's a little wood rot starting to come in on where the shingles used to be. And so I called a roofer. He came out. He said he couldn't fix it, that the shingles were too old and that too brittle. So he wanted to put a whole new roof on the whole house, you know. Well, I didn't trust that right away, so I called another roofer, and he came out, and I said, can you fix this? And he said, sure. And he went up, and he came back. He said, the shingles are too brittle, and I can't get the old ones off. And he said, but, you really probably need a whole new roof. And I said, look, I don't need a whole new roof. I really need my little patch over here fixed. And he said, well, I can fix that up, and maybe I can give you a quote for a new roof at the same time while I'm doing it. Well, I'm wanting my roof fixed. So I'm thinking, I ought to just tell the guy, yeah, give me a quote, and let's take a look at it. Basically lie in order to get the work done. But I decided not to. And so he had promised to come by and fix it. So he didn't do it. He called, back and forth. So here we are now, and we're like in the middle of the rainy season. And, basically I can't get anybody to come out and fix this little piece of roof. I don't know. I guess what would have been a $300 or $400 repair is going to become a $2,000 or $3,000 repair is what's going to happen here. But it's just this idea of these men not saying what they mean. They don't say what they mean. And then meaning what you say. So when you do say yes, let it be yes. Perform. And then when you do say no, let it be no. That's what Jesus is saying here. He says, simply do this. Say what you mean and mean what you say. Okay. 3 points that I'd like to make. The first one is the impossibility of keeping the law apart from grace. Hey, there's no way that you can always keep your word. The Bible tells us that inside of us, we have the Spirit of the living God to empower us. The Bible also tells us that we still have the old man in us as well. We have the flesh. The Bible says it this way, the flesh wars against the Spirit, and the Spirit wars against the flesh. So we have God's Spirit, but we also have the flesh in us. There's no possible way to not have murderous, angry thoughts. There's no possible way to not have adulterous thoughts. There's no possible way to keep our oaths, to keep our vows, our promises, unless we are in dependence upon the grace of God through the power of the Holy Spirit that's living within us. And you should not expect we don't expect to always be the men we want to be. But when we do fall, because of grace, we have an advocate, Jesus, and we can come to the Father, and we can ask for forgiveness, and we can try again. We can work again. If you want to look more on this, I would highly recommend you reading Romans chapters 3 through 7. Romans chapters 3 through 7 really break down, that's not the purpose of this talk today, really break down the relationship of grace and law and the Holy Spirit. The second point is to bring order and stability into a sin-crazed world. Why does Jesus put so much emphasis on meaning what we say? Again, the whole effectiveness of the world order, the foundation of everything is trust. It's keeping one's word. And without honesty, then the whole system dysfunctions. Just take that Department of Agriculture illustration, for example. That whole system is built on trust. They have a 1 or 2 page questionnaire. Have you been traveled out of the country? Did you bring in fruit in the country? Things like this. And their ability to protect the food supply for the United States depends on people giving honest answers. Third point, it's to increase our witness to our loved ones and to the world. Marriage, I think, would be an interesting oath to zero in on. My parents had a beautiful 54-year marriage. Now, as it turned out, they weren't so hot as parents, but they were fantastic as a couple. And they modeled, what they modeled to me, the oath. They kept their vows, and as their son, I saw them go through their struggles, but they kept their oath. They said what they meant, and they meant what they said. And it was powerful. That's the big idea. I will simply say what I mean and mean what I say. They made a vow that till death do us part, they would be together. And then they lived it out, and they modeled it. It was a witness to me. And so, and then Patsy's parents did the same thing. Patsy's parents did the same thing, and the result is that I've now been married 35 years, and Patsy's sisters, their marriages have survived because of the witness of keeping that oath. It's powerful. How can we increase the value of our yes, the third part of this? Well, I think, number one, one way to increase the value of our yes is to say no more often. I have a really good friend who simply cannot say no. He always says, oh yeah, let's get together. But he has a reputation for double parking his appointments. He's been doing this ever since I've known him. So he'll say yes to you, and then he'll say yes to me, and he'll say yes to you sometimes, all in the same time slot, because he just has a difficult time saying no. And so his word is not his bond. You can't trust him. Simply put, he doesn't mean what he says because he doesn't do it, doesn't make it happen. On your tables, another way, second way, is through the repetition of our yeses. On your tables is a small card like this, and I'd like everybody to grab hold one. At the top it says the marriage prayer. On one side it says the marriage prayer for her. On the other side it says the marriage prayer for him. So one is pinkish and one is bluish. So you may want to, if you want to look along with me, look on the bluish side. David Delk and I have written a book called The Marriage Prayer, and it's built around this prayer. The idea is that this is a prayer that you can repeat every day if you want to. You can pray this prayer. And basically, what it boils down to, it's a repetition of your yes. It's a repetition of the oath that you took if you're married. Let's look on here and let me read this. Father, I said till death do us part. I want to mean it. Help me love you more than her, and her more than anyone or anything else. Help me bring her into your presence today. Make us one, like you are three in one. I want to hear her, cherish her, and serve her, so she would love you more, and we can bring you glory. Amen. We all go through times in our marriages where, frankly, we just don't like her that much. We also go through times in our marriage where she just doesn't like us that much. So what is the glue, the moral glue that keeps us in the deal? It's the oath. It's the yes. It's meaning what we've said. We've already said what we meant. And we meant it when we said it. Now it's time to actually do that. And repeating our yeses is one way to help solidify that. So I'd encourage you, that's yours to keep. No charge. And I'd encourage you to consider praying this. I've been praying this prayer now for some time. And I don't know if it's changed my marriage, but it has changed me. I think about my wife differently because I have repeated the oath that I took 35 years ago. I've repeated it so many times now that I actually do want to hear her. I find myself, in a different frame of mind in terms of wanting to hear her. I find myself in a different frame of mind in terms of wanting to cherish her. I actually find myself in a different frame of mind wanting to serve her. Honey, would you take out the trash? Absolutely. And you know what? I used to be a chore postponer par excellence. Man, if I see a trash bag sitting by the door now, I just grab that puppy up and take it right out to the... I'm the envy of all the women in the neighborhood. How can we increase the value of our yeses? Well, learn and be confident in saying no. And then also, maybe repeat your yeses. The big idea today is this: I will simply say what I mean and mean what I say. I will be a man of integrity. I will let my word mean something, count for something. I understand the impossibility of doing this apart from grace, so I'm going to depend on Christ. I know that if I do this, it will bring stability in the world. And I also know that if I do this, it will be a powerful witness to the power of Jesus Christ. So, let's pray. Father, lapses, whether they are ethical lapses or lapses in good judgment or even forgetfulness, but not keeping our word for whatever reason, Lord, you have chosen to make keeping our word in everything a very high priority in the kingdom of God. And so we want to make this a high priority in our lives. You've said to simply let our yes be yes and no be no. And we pray, Father, that you would give us the grace to overcome the impossibility of doing this. And then, Father, that we would bring order to our world and that we would be a witness to our loved ones in our world. That we would simply say what we mean and then mean what we say. We ask this in Jesus' name. Amen.